Me cobré mucho.
mostrant-se fosc i atrás. La lluna no darà claro i tot l'amor serà
Buenas tardes. Ella es María Arnal.
She is Maria Arnal. A round of applause for her. Good afternoon to one and all. So, Maria, tell us what you just sung. Tell us something about it, about this instrument, and how does it work in connection with your computer and with your voice. So, what I just sung is a traditional centuries old song about the vision of the apocalypse, and the Sibilla is a character that was born in the old Greece in the Delphos oracle, and Delphos was this spiritual center in ancient times, and everybody went there for recommendations, for help when they had a suffering, kings, peasants, whoever. And then During the history of art, we can see 6 Sevillas in the Sixtine Chapel, and also we can see them in paintings, in statues. And the Mediterranean region, we have this traditional song. It is the Sevilla's song, and it was very sung. It was sung in a lot of regions in the Mediterranean, in Catalonia, and in many places. Sorry, I'm giving you too many details. So, Sevilla, during the Christianism, is a prophet in the Bible, and it's a woman. It is not very common. She has the power to see visions and to forecast things. And it is normally sung in the Christmas night. And in my last LP, in which I talk about the apocalypse, it means revelation in old Greek language. So if we go back to the origin of the word, it means to have a different mindset. So I wanted to sing this song again and changing it completely. In order to do that, I thought it was going to be very interesting to connect it with some of the contemporary fights and the battle we are facing as human beings, and also connecting this to these apocalypse stories, and also the climate change and feminism, and with many other ideas that are surrounding us as human beings now in the year 2022. So I got in touch with Collie Hurdon, and they've been working, applying artificial intelligence in music, and she generates synthetic voices, and the voices that you heard accompanying my voice were synthetic voices generated by the computer. And this would be the first answer to your question. And then the second one, I'm going to be brief, I promise. This is an organetto, and it is a very old musical instrument coming from the old Greece Empire, from a Greek instrument called hydraulis, using the water pressure. And in this organetto, this is the first organ that you could carry anywhere. And in the back, it has a device to put some pressure. It is a bellow, and it is a unique instrument. You will not find another one anywhere else in the world. It has an application, and it connected with a modification system, and then I can connect it to my computer. And it was adapted by Albert Blancafort, and here you can see his name. And he is a specialist in the modification of organs. And for example, in Montserrat Monastery, in Palau Güell, and I gave a concert in the Sonar Festival this year, and I used it there for the first time. It has a motor, and it gives a constant flow of pressure, and this means that the sound is stable. So what's interesting about that is that this can be removed so that the instrument goes back to its essence. But this device makes these pistons to be in touch, so to say, with the computer. And then in my computer, I can write down the number of notes and the lasting of the note. I could talk about this for a long time. Well, in any case, Maria, we have already interviewed her, and with her collaboration with Colly Hurden, and it is the most important person nowadays in music. She is doing a very interesting project in her TED speech. She talked about this, about the civil arrangements, and that I wrote so that the synthetic voices could sing them. And the speech, can you imagine singing with the voice of your favorite artist? And what we did in the Sonar Festival, with the application of artificial intelligence, and together with Matt and Holly, and the duet Tarta Lenena, they are very good, and we looked for different applications of these synthetic voices, and also with Otro Labs team, which is a very powerful. I have a lot of information, as you can see, and thank you very much for being here, and I hope to see you very soon.
Nos pareció interesante.
Well, we thought it was going to be interesting to talk about artificial intelligence and the organeto, the voice of God. So we're going to start with the session. Thank you very much.
Pues empezamos. Soy Jaime García Cantero, encantado.
I am Jaime García Cantero, and welcome to Onda Cero, welcome to Barcelona. And the city is going to play an important role and a paramount role in today's session. It's not only the city of Barcelona, but also its culture, design, art, because some asked what was the meaning of this year zero and why are we talking about year zero. And as you say, it is the first year after the dumb virus and the first year after the war in the European continent, and the concept as a starting point is related to culture, to art, and it is related to Mr. Malevich, and to me, it is the most important artist in the 20th century. Back in 2015, obsessed about the goals of art, he created the 010 exhibition. So Malevich thought about the future of art starting in 1915, and that he wanted to put together and to invite 10 big artists to find the purpose of art, the goal of art. And then Malevich, there were many more artists. It was not 10 artists, it were 14. And today we have 14 speakers, and we wanted to play with this painting. That was the main painting back in that exhibition in 1915. And also this Malevich blue cube surrounding the organeto. Thank you to the sponsors for being here, Telefonica and Banco de Santander, FEPSA, Airbus and Indra. They are all present. And also we wanted to thank the municipality of Barcelona, our host in this wonderful Museum of the Design. It is a pleasure to organize this event in Barcelona, and also because we want to give this holistic vision of the future. The future starts today in Barcelona, and Thank you very much to the municipality of Barcelona, Mr. Jaume Colbone, and Felix, Mikel, and all the team that made this possible. Jaume, if you want to open the session.
Gracias. Gracias, Jaime. Gracias al Grupo Prisa por...
Thank you to the Prisa Group for fostering this experience and this space here in Retina, and thank you to all the team for thinking of Barcelona. Let me congratulate you, because I think it's the greatest choice, because this is Kilometer Zero, the design hub of creativity and design, and it is Kilometer Zero of art and the starting point in innovation and technology, and in the neighborhood 22/22 art. So we have found this starting point in this Museum of Design, and it is a pleasure to us to welcome such an initiative related to the most important communication group and El País newspaper, reference for all of us, because we need some spaces to share ideas. And if we had to define the future and the main characteristics of the future, so Maria was talking about the inspiration of her music and the Sibila and so on, when she talks about the apocalypse and what we understand as the apocalypse, and then this idea. So the only truth here is the uncertainty, and we live a world after the COVID crisis, and it has been a very difficult time for all the humanity, the uncertainties, the challenges that we have as human beings, and also some of the topics are included in today's session. So this uncertainty that we need to face from the political perspective, what we need to do is to give solutions, and also to neutralize and to reduce these uncertainties and these spaces to share things are great examples. And let me tell you something, what's happening about the future and about the idea of the future. This trend to talk about the apocalypse, going back to this initial idea, is the starting point of resignation and thinking that there are no solutions, or that the solutions will not solve the problems. And some of the lessons of the pandemic is that the human beings have an extremely capacity to research and to have a joint purpose, and we've been able to overcome this moment, which will be remembered as one of the most complicated moments in our lives. So the challenge that we have now is the climate change, and how to face the consequences on our lives, and also the challenge of the inequalities related to the intensification of the technological revolution, and also that there are parts of the world that have regression policies, and that these policies threaten our continent. We thought it was an oasis of welfare and well-being. And I think that we can have this apocalyptic vision, or a vision of trust of what we can do as a society. And I think that the second is the best one. And also, we have to give concrete answers to these uncertainties, to these challenges, and to these fears, and doing public policies. In the case of Barcelona, before the pandemic, we designed a project that we are applying right now, Barcelona New Green Deal, about the diversification of the economy, decarbonization, attracting talent as the foundation of our future, an economy with a purpose in order to increase the quality of the employment. And we are taking some steps in order to achieve it with a lot of effort and a lot of consensus, and doing a joint reflection and engaging all the stakeholders of the city. So this space, this museum, is a meeting point for this type of reflections, and we organized the Biennale de Pensament. It is a 2-year event that we organized in the squares of Barcelona, and I think it's a good idea that Retina organizes this type of events because Barcelona is a revolutionary city, and we are an optimistic city, and because of our Mediterranean character and with our positive history, and that's what when you proposed the idea of doing this in our non-conformist city, we gave you all our support. And I hope that this optimistic vision, as an introduction to the event from our team that work for this, and that can help us to generate the reflections that are going to be very useful to face the challenges that we have as a society. Thank you very much for having invited me, and good luck.
Muchísimas gracias, Jaume. Pues decía Jaume que Barcelona y lo es.
Well, as Jaume said, Barcelona is a revolutionary city, and part of the ideas we are going to have today, we are going to invite these artists, going back to the idea of Malebik. We are going to listen to people from different backgrounds and ideas that you will find surprising. And to start with, and talking about apocalypse and what Maria said, we have invited Mark O'Connell. He is the writer of a book that was translated into Spanish, How to Be a Machine, that was translated last year, as I said, about transhumanism, in which Mark has a very critical vision of why millionaires want to live forever. Well, if you're a millionaire, maybe you want to live forever, but well, Mark has just published his new book, Note from the Apocalypse, and he talks to different types of people who think that the world is going to end. And I think it's very interesting because half of the people who thought that we're going to live forever think that the world is going to end tomorrow. So there's something wrong in these millionaires who are concerned about very different things. So to talk about this idea of being a machine of the apocalypse, we have Mark O'Connell, who is in Dublin. Are you here, Dublin? Are you here, Mark O'Donnell? Well, in Dublin.
In Barcelona, virtually. You are not lucky enough to be here. The weather is terribly nice. So next time. So it's your turn. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you for that introduction. I wish I could have understood it. Buenas tardes. My name is Mark O'Connell, and I'm a writer from Dublin. My two books, broadly speaking, have been about the future, about how our imagination of the future from a technological and political perspective informs the way that we live in the present. I write narrative nonfiction in which I tend to explore quite large, abstract ideas through the lens of individual people or groups of people whose ideas and ways of negotiating them are often quite extreme and idiosyncratic, but which seem to me to illuminate some larger truth about the world we all live in. In both of my books, To Be a Machine and Notes from an Apocalypse, I write about people who are, in their different ways, advocating for extremely radical visions of the future of humanity, both pessimistic and optimistic. I'll say a little bit about both of these books, which I've come to see as a kind of narrative diptych in which one panel depicts a utopian vision of the future and the other a broadly dystopian one, in fact, outright apocalyptic. Although both of these books look outward toward the world and toward the future, they both have their origins in and explore very personal hopes and anxieties. They're books that, while about the future and about other people, are also at least partly focused on autobiographical concerns and the present. The first of these books, To Be a Machine, published in 2017, is about transhumanism, which is a movement predicated on the conviction that we can and should use technology to become immortal and in various other ways to push out the boundaries of the human condition. Transhumanists want a future in which we achieve a whole other level of evolution through technological implants and enhancements. A lot of them believe that it's our fate to ultimately leave our flesh and blood bodies behind and upload our minds to machines. As far out and as crazy as it sounds, this movement and its ideas have quite a lot of influence in Silicon Valley, and there are powerful and influential people who are dedicated to bringing about some version of this future. Before I go any further into talking about this book, I want to say a little bit about why I started writing it. I don't think of myself as a science writer. I have a PhD in English literature, and my background is as a literary critic. I've always been very interested in art and mythology that tries to get to the root of the strangeness of being human, in particular, the existential motherlode of anxiety about our mortality. And I've been obsessed for years with the biblical story of the fall, which for me is this incredibly rich and profound poetic account of our own strangeness to ourselves, our own inability to accept ourselves as animals. The basic idea of this story for me is that we weren't supposed to be this way, that we were meant to be exempt from suffering and death and human frailty, and that we brought this condition on ourselves as a punishment. What I always found most fascinating, I think, about this was the idea that our own nature seemed somehow unnatural to us. When my wife and I became parents for the first time, 9 years ago now, I found myself thinking about this a lot. The experience of watching my wife give birth and of being partly responsible for the existence and continued well-being of this tiny, fragile little human being, our son, led to a period of obsession with mortality and human fragility. And it was around this point that I started reading a lot about transhumanism, this movement that explicitly offered a way out of this mortality and fragility, a way of transcending our condition through technology. I was initially so fascinated by it because it seemed to me to arise out of the same basic existential unease with the human condition as the biblical story of the fall, this sense of the unacceptability of our natural condition. In writing the book, I visited a lot of strange places and met a lot of strange people. I spent time at the world's largest cryonics facility in Phoenix, Arizona, where the corpses of recently deceased transhumanists are stored and preserved in liquid nitrogen with a view to thawing them and bringing them back to life at some notional point in the future when technological progress allows for such a thing. The idea, very roughly speaking, is that they will have their brains removed and their preserved minds scanned and uploaded to computers and then transferred to humanoid robots. This is how transhumanists tend to envision their future eternal life. The concept of mind uploading is a major article of faith among transhumanists. It's kind of the key to the whole post-human immortal future. Along with Peter Thiel, one of the most prominent people to have signed up for preservation at Alcor, is the futurist Ray Kurzweil. Kurzweil is the director of engineering at Google, and he's the high priest of what's called the technological singularity. Kurzweil has a very impressive track record in predicting technological trends, and he wrote a book called The Singularity is Near, where he outlines how in the very near future, he claims by around the year 2045, artificial intelligence is going to become so sophisticated and so powerful that we'll be able to upload our minds to AI supercomputers and merge with this technology to become bodiless intelligences that will be able to take any form and live eternally. The idea of uploading ourselves to machines has been around for a long time in science fiction. Arthur C. Clarke based some of his plots around it, and you can see it in episodes of television shows like Black Mirror and films like Ghost in the Shell and so on. But it's a thing that people, particularly people in Silicon Valley, believe will become a reality and are actively pursuing. One of the people I wrote about in my book is a man named Randall Kuhne, a Dutch computational neuroscientist based in the Bay Area, whose entire life's work is figuring out how uploading a human mind to a machine might be possible. Randall is one of the most fascinating people I've ever met. He's engaged in this project that seems completely insane when you first encounter it, and actually, to me, kept seeming insane, but he is a tremendous communicator and quite charismatic in his way, and quite normal and likable. And when I was with him, I kept having these moments where I would be listening to him very intently, trying to get my head around some technical matter he was explaining to me. And I'd be close to getting a handle on what he was saying. And then I would suddenly pull back and be hit by the feeling that what Randall was talking about was utterly mad, completely unhinged. That if he achieved what he was talking about, it would amount to the most profound transformation in the history of humanity. That it would actually maybe be the end of the history of humanity. Randall, for his part, was very good at bracketing those kinds of concerns. Like most scientists, he was very narrowly focused on finding a solution to a fairly narrowly defined problem. The problem in this case being the human body, of human minds being contained within human bodies. Despite the professed rationalism of almost every transhumanist I met, it's a movement made up, after all, almost entirely of atheists. There is something very obviously religious, or at least quasi-religious, about their way of thinking about the future. Where the religious faiths of the world imagine salvation from the human condition through the intervention of their various gods, transhumanism places technology in the role of a god. Transhumanism, in fact, is an apocalyptic movement in the sense that its adherents envision a change in human experience so radical as to be essentially the end of the world as we know it. So if I hadn't already written a book about transhumanism, I would surely have included at least a chapter about it in my second book, Notes from an Apocalypse, which is about, among other things, the various ways in which people are preparing for how they imagine the end of the world, for the collapse of civilization. The book, similarly to my first book, began in a personal way. It began as an attempt to negotiate my own complicated anxieties about the state of the world, about the apparent fragility of the systems through which we live our lives, and in particular, as a parent of very young children, the unfurling prospect of climate catastrophe. One of the advantages of being a writer, of course, is that it's always possible to divert your emotions, your anxieties and your obsessions into your work, to forcibly requisition your anxiety and fear and press them into service for creative ends. The Freudian term for this, I believe, is sublimation. And sublimation is what I think I was up to in pursuing my obsession with the idea of the apocalypse and eventually writing a book about it. I began with doomsday preppers, with their YouTube videos and forum posts and so on. But in the interest of furthering my own dubious project of sublimation, I decided to stand up from my laptop and go out into the world in search of various manifestations of these apocalyptic anxieties in which I was becoming increasingly interested. Somewhere during that time, a book deal happened, if you're wondering about the logistics, but we don't need to go into that here. And so I traveled to the prairies of South Dakota, where I met a real estate entrepreneur who specialized in luxury bunkers and who was attempting to create what he called the world's largest survival community. This was a chilling vision of the future, or possible future, as I could have imagined. A vast tract of prairie farmland, once a US military munitions storage facility, dotted with some 500 reinforced steel and concrete domes, which had been built for keeping bombs in during the Second World War, and were now being sold off as survival shelters for about $35,000 each. The place was being billed by the real estate entrepreneur, overseeing it as the place from which civilization would be rebuilt in the wake of an apocalyptic event. Its perimeters, I was informed, would, in the wake of such an apocalyptic event, be patrolled by a private army ready to defend the lavishly prepared denizens of the survival community against the unprepared hordes who would be trying to make their way in. This seemed to me like a surreal symbol of the inequalities that currently existed in our world, a nightmarish image of the psychic trajectory of terminal stage capitalism. Later, I went to New Zealand, a country at that time viewed, because of its abundant supplies of clean and fresh water, its low population density, its geographical location, and its stable political structures, viewed by the tech elite of Silicon Valley as a safe retreat in the event of civilizational collapse. In New Zealand's South Island, I visited, or to be strictly accurate, trespassed, on a former sheep station recently purchased as an apocalyptic retreat by the billionaire tech entrepreneur Peter Thiel, a man who has publicly expressed the opinion that democracy and capitalism might no longer be compatible. Later again, I went to Los Angeles to attend a conference on Mars colonization. Here, I encountered people who were convinced that humanity needed a so-called backup planet, an entire other world to retreat to, on which civilization might be replicated and survive should humanity be wiped out on Earth. These people were, by and large, much more optimistic than the doomsday preppers and luxury survivalists I had previously encountered. They were, it seemed to me, trying to recapture a vision of the future that had been lost in recent decades, a mid-20th century attitude of boundless optimism about the future of technology and the future of humanity. In this, of course, they had a good deal in common with the transhumanists I wrote about in my first book. But these Mars enthusiasts believed that it was our destiny to explore the galaxy, inhabit the further reaches of the universe. But their figurehead was another tech billionaire, Elon Musk, who had co-founded the company PayPal with Peter Thiel, and who had gone on to start the company SpaceX, and to focus his energies on getting humans to Mars and setting up private, corporate-run colonies there. And there was something about this vision of the future that seemed to me to be of a piece with the doomsday preppers and luxury survivalists I had previously met. It was about escape, an elect few humans escaping the burning wreckage of the world and carrying the flame of civilization. Common to all these visions of the end of the world was what I came to think of as an ethos of escape. They were all about the survival of the few, and all of them seemed to me like extreme metaphors for capitalist individualism, which is to say that they were more interesting to me as representations of the present than as prophecies of apocalypse. And that's the thing about the apocalypse. The first thing to be said about the word apocalypse, in fact, is that in the original Greek, it means an uncovering, or literally a revelation. And our imagination of the apocalypse uncovers and reveals much more about the present, I think, about its anxieties and obsessions than it does about any future. It's an idea that recurs again and again throughout history, and which rears its head in particular during times of unusual turbulence, in which the world seems to be changing at an unsustainable rate, and from which vantage the future looks forbiddingly dark, times like our own, in other words. I'm often asked, as the author of 2 books whose subject is, broadly speaking, the future, what I think the future holds. My answer usually disappoints people and sometimes bewilders them. Not only do I not claim to know any more about the future than the average person, I'm not even particularly concerned about the future, which is to say, not even particularly interested in it as a topic. An example of this is that I wrote an entire book about Apocalyptic Anxieties, which came out in April 2020, in which I had mentioned viral pandemics, I think in passing once. So my claim to be able to predict the future is pretty shaky. What interests me in both of my books, though, is the idea of the future and what our imagination of it might tell us about the world in which we already live. Both of my books, I always argue, are actually about the present. And in fact, they're not even about the present, because the experience of modernity is one of constant change and flux. They're actually about the recent past, or at least my attempt to capture it through the idiosyncratic lens of the different varieties of futurism. Because the thing about the future, of course, is that it never arrives. It's always just out of reach. And by the time we get to it, it's become that much more strange and interesting and impenetrable time, the present. Gracias.
So thanks a lot, Mark, and next time here in Barcelona, okay? Bye, thank you. Hablábamos y presentábamos.
We're introducing Mark, talking about a book I recommended, and now we're going to talk another book I also recommended by Isabel Duval, a collaborator of Retina. She recommended a book with a very provoking title, Fully Automated Luxury Communism, and I asked her to write a column for us, and it ended up being a long text as normal, as she's a philosopher. It was really successful and a lot of buzz. And we asked the author to come here today, Aaron Bastani, and he will talk about this provoking vision of this combination of automation and social capacities that he has. Aaron, whenever you want, a big applause for him.
So it's interesting, Mark was much more skeptical than I am about big predictions. I think we can actually be quite certain about the future. The future of humanity at the midpoint of this century will be old people in big cities afraid of the sky. Those are three trends we can be pretty certain of: demographic aging, urbanization, climate change. And it does summon quite a vivid, primeval picture about what the future actually looks like, because that sounds quite archaic and millenarian rather than utopian and optimistic. And as something of a millenarian skeptic myself, I find that quite an alluring, interesting picture, and I think it's probably accurate. Before I carry on with my talk, I'd also like to say one more thing. As a child of the 1990s, I always loved that phrase, "May you live in interesting times." How interesting. A Chinese proverb. Except we now know it's actually a curse. Living in interesting times is often not a very enjoyable thing to do. Believe me, I'm from the United Kingdom. It's never been more interesting politically. It's a very, very painful thing to endure. I'm here to talk about artificial intelligence, automation, its implications, both economic, political, social. Unlike Mark, I'm not going to talk about a general artificial intelligence, about Skynet, or the prospect of the Terminator or the Matrix, because actually artificial intelligence doesn't need to go that far to have, and I use this word, I think, with precision, revolutionary implications. It doesn't need to go that far. We don't need to have this false binary of where we are today, or Skynet and your NutriBullet declaring war on humanity, okay? There's a middle ground, which is what's coming our way, and that's changes in regard to weak AI. Now, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, artificial intelligence could contribute $15.7 trillion to the global economy in 2030. $15.7 trillion. That's the same as the nominal GDP of Japan, India, Britain, and Germany combined. Now, whereas hard AI, as Mark was talking about there, is self-aware machines that are capable of autonomy and executive function, more or less like us, weak AI is where they solve problems in a very limited field. And while that doesn't lead to a technological singularity, it's really, really important. So that $15.7 trillion added to the global economy refers to weak AI, technology which is already here. This isn't some, English radical speculating on some bizarre, utopian prospects. It's here, a lot of it. So what are the goods and services that we talk about when we're referring to that $15.7 trillion? Automated self-driving logistics is one. Think no more truck drivers. Self-driving vehicle fleets is another. Think no more taxi drivers. Not good for my dad, he's one of them. Now, I'm skeptical about how quickly that happens. I think with justification. You've got major barriers with regards to technology, with regards to regulation, and of course with regards to politics. We all know how powerful taxi drivers are as a cartel. But I think it's fair to say that weak AI is going to have massive implications for these kinds of industries before 2050. I hope everyone in this room will be alive by then. That's pretty soon. And given 3.4 million Americans drive trucks for a living, that's significant. Now, for a long time, really until the last decade, we thought that technological change would impact low-skilled workers the most. We thought that people who don't earn much, who don't have university degrees, they'd be the first to lose their jobs. And actually, at the end, all that would be left is the creative industries. We'd all be interior decorators. How wonderful. Personal trainers. It doesn't work like that, sadly. I mean, I wish it did. It'd be wonderful. And actually, as we're increasingly finding out, the very first jobs to go in a world of weak AI are things like accountancy, legal services, even elements of the healthcare industry. A 2016 study by Deloitte suggested that technology is already leading to job losses in the UK legal sector, and some 114,000 jobs could be lost in the next 20 years. Those jobs in law or accountancy will still exist, but technological change and weak AI will mean that productivity per worker will be so much higher than it presently is, they just won't employ the same numbers as they do in the 2020s. Now, what jobs won't be automated? Ironically, it's the unskilled ones. It's the ones we don't pay much money for. Think elderly care workers. Think household cleaners. Think, actually, for now, a driver. Why? Well, despite science fiction telling you that the most accomplished thing a human can do is mathematics and higher order cognition and playing chess, it's actually much harder to automate washing dishes or tying up your shoelaces than beating Garry Kasparov. That's very counterintuitive, isn't it? But that's fundamentally where we are. There's even a term for it. It's called Moravec's paradox. So the things that we generally associate with lower cognitive function, like I say, cleaning the dishes, cleaning the house, anyone can do that, are actually the last things that will be automated. Because actually, in terms of computation, they need far more than crunching millions of potential moves against a chess grandmaster. Has big implications for the economy. Now, one response to that, an intelligent one, is to say, we have an aging population. We'll need far more people working in adult social care anyway. So it doesn't matter. What are you worrying about? And that's true. 8 of the 10 fastest growing professions in the US are in the care industry. It's a very good point. But given the average US worker in care earns $22,000 a year, the prospect of millions of Americans going from other professions into that industry will do one thing. I'm pretty sure most people don't know what that is. It would depress wages. So already, even without Skynet, even without the technological singularity, we can see what automation and weak AI will do. It will depress wages, even more than they already are. Now, for workers in the labor movement, trade unionists, that should mean a focus on those industries which will grow as a result of Moravec's paradox. The strategic points of leverage in tomorrow's economy are jobs like care work and healthcare sectors, as much, if not more so, than energy and transport. This should be a consideration for progressive political leaders. It's a shame the politician left the room. That's a shame. If you want to level up workers' standards, you want to start with what is a growing part of the labor market. And that won't be many industries, but it will certainly be the case in care. Now to the positive stuff, because I feel like in these conversations we get very down on things. You know, I did a TED talk in Vancouver earlier this year, and I was having dinner with a lady, the chief scientist from Moderna. And I said, look, strictly confidential, okay, except for you guys. When do you think we'll have a vaccine for cancer? She said, by the end of the 2020s. And I think it's interesting that we're talking about crisis and collapse and chaos, justifiably in some instances, and at the same time we are looking at an mRNA vaccine for cancers. It might not happen, by the way, but this is somebody who's developed an existing vaccine for a deadly pathogen in the last several years. So I think it's worth listening to somebody from Moderna. If I'm right in my book, which by the way is available in Spanish, the technological trends of the 21st century, from energy and labor to information, will be deflationary. Now that is a very radical thing to say in 2022. I know, you fill up your car, you're looking at your energy bills, you're looking at food, you think, what the hell is this guy talking about? What an idiot. I know, inflation right now in the UK is 10%. It's the highest it's been for 40 years. But this is temporary. Because, like I say in my book, available in Spanish, in energy, work, and information, the prices will go down. I believe there's somebody talking later on about renewable energy, and they will explain how cheap solar and wind is going to be this century. Solar and wind energy have been getting cheaper every single year for the last 55 years. Actually, further, Vanguard satellites, the first time we have solar cells. 60 years, 65 years, there you go. I'm underselling it. It's been getting cheaper every single year for 65 years. And wind and solar will continue to get cheaper for every single year for the rest of your life. Now, when you think that solar today, albeit in California, okay, Britain's not as sunny as California, today is the cheapest source of energy anywhere on Earth, that's quite significant. So yes, the 2020s are going to be really grim, particularly for Europe. We've got no fossil fuels, particularly Britain, by the way. Let's not even say Europe. At least you guys have food. Somewhere like Britain, we have to import fuel, import food. It's going to be harsh, horrible. But actually, if you look at after 2030, energy gets very cheap very quickly. Similar with labor with regards to automation, the productivity increases we see there. Even though you've got major inflationary trends coming from elsewhere, demographic aging, fewer people, we're going to have fewer people, that's another great trend this century, right? It's going to mean that labor can ask for more money. Just look what happened after the Black Death 600 years ago. It was fabulous if you were a farm worker and you lived, the Black Death. Your wages went right up because there were fewer people to compete with you in the labor market. That's going to happen with demographic aging too, especially in somewhere like Europe, where we have aging populations. Humanity's been around for 300,000 years, and we have always, virtually always, there's been a few bumps along the ride, gone up in terms of more people. Actually, this century, again, sort of responding to what Mark said, one of the certainties of this century is that we'll probably plateau as a species, probably around 10 billion, maybe less. That is one of the certainties. So there'll be inflationary trends from demographic aging, but deflationary trends, I think, everywhere else. Now, as a society, we need to work out what we want to do with all that deflation. Do we want that to go to cost saving and enhancing the profits of various companies, allowing new monopoly models to emerge in artificial intelligence? Like I say, $15.7 trillion of wealth is going to appear. Is that going to help the bottom line of various new businesses, or is it going to underpin something I would prefer, which is universal basic services? Health, housing, transport, education, free at the point of use, universally available. And I think actually the dividend of AI should help us do that rather than add to the spreadsheets of the world's largest businesses. And by the way, it's the world's largest businesses. I'll get back to that in a second. So I want you to imagine for a second when I'm saying universal basic services, what does that mean? Well, think free self-driving electric buses for all rather than privatized gridlock for cars. Another is how the falling cost of gene sequencing, which with liquid biopsy should allow us to locate cancers at what we might call stage 0 at a fraction of the cost. These technologies should benefit the taxpayer and the patient, not profit. So cast your mind to a world of high automation, low inequality, and universal basic services. Maybe 50 years from now. You go to work for 4 hours in one of the few, very few, remaining labor-intensive industries, a state-run elderly care centre, before coming home to cook for your children. Later, you meet friends to plan holidays together, an airship flying over the rewilded forests of Central Europe. You joke about studying for that 3rd degree, this time in medicine, because you find radical life extension so fascinating. Of course, that would be free, just like your first 2 degrees. Later, you take the bus, regular, free, electric, to your routine monthly appointment at your local health centre. The bus is self-driving, runs on renewable electricity, and uses powerful predictive algorithms to determine what routes need the right supply at certain times. A liquid biopsy at the clinic, again, free at the point of use, discovers that you have stage 0 pancreatic cancer. No problem. Some pills will solve that. Now, in some ways, this world resembles ours. Yet in others, it is entirely different. Let me be clear, especially to the business people here. There are still markets for many, many things. I'm not proposing that the state starts to make shoes or paper or shirts, but we should have a really deep conversation about the role of markets in those areas fundamental for human well-being: healthcare, housing, transport, and education. Now, what's the alternative to what I'm talking about here? What if we don't subordinate weak AI to things like universal basic services, or welfare state 2.0, basically? What's the alternative? Well, the answer is more global, regional, and individual inequality. Now, this is, again, truly fascinating. Of that $15.7 trillion we'll see by 2030, 70% is expected to go to China and the US. Imagine a world where the US and China leave the rest of the world behind in a manner similar to that of the industrializing countries after the early 19th century, except this time it's worse. So again, for the business class of Spain or Britain or France or Germany, that's a problem. This is already happening, by the way. California's economy, as you may have seen this week, is now bigger than Germany's. Hardly surprising when you consider 50% of all venture capital in the US is going to the Sunshine State, some of which is pursuing AI-centric business. The 4 largest US companies by market capitalization are among the 7 giants of AI research. So globally, there are 7 major companies when it comes to AI research, 4 in the US. They are, by the way, the 4 largest companies, surprise, surprise, by market capitalization in the United States. Not in this order because it changes all the time, but I believe today, I could be wrong, it's Apple, you've got Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft. So sorry, 5 of the 7. And if you put together the market capitalization of those 5 businesses, you get $6.9 trillion, about 1.5 times the GDP of Japan. Now, growing up, if you told me there was going to be a $1 trillion business, now I know inflation's a thing, but this is really extraordinary. If you told me growing up there'd be a $1 trillion business, I would have thought, come on. Well, actually today, Apple's worth about $2.5 trillion. And that trend of more and more value going to fewer and fewer companies is only going to get worse over time. So what AI, combined with market capitalism, means is a further intensification of what we already have, a concentration of wealth in specific countries, regions, and individuals. Look what Amazon has done to the British High Street. I live in Portsmouth for my sins. It looks like there's been a bomb dropped on the High Street there. Yeah? Amazon's done more to destroy small British businesses than the Luftwaffe. That sounds like I'm making an exaggeration. I'm really not. Now, rather than further distort the labour market and increase inequality, it should be part of a wider platform to enhance liberty. I'm talking about AI here. Now, this seems utopian and frivolous, but this technology, if it emerged, say, 70 years ago, would have been adopted by the state to achieve precisely that. If you look at, say, the US and the USSR, 1950s, if you get weak artificial intelligence, it would have absolutely been subordinated to the quote-unquote public interest. That's where geopolitics comes in. But we live in a very different world. I suppose I'll finish with this. I think that the 2020s are going to be extraordinarily grim for Europe, and I include Britain in that, unlike some of my compatriots. Extraordinarily grim. We're going to get very poor very quickly. And I think that's something actually, again, for the business people here to think about. Our companies aren't going to be competitive anymore, simply because our energy is too expensive. Our labor is apparently too expensive. And of course, we can't access the big, huge amounts of data that the Chinese and the Americans can in terms of building the AI applications of tomorrow. So what can we do? What can we do? I think we can be a world leader in that rarest of commodities in the 21st century, political stability. How do we do that? We have to generate a new political compact between labour and capital, integrating some of the trends with regards to technological change that I've spoken about today. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Aaron. Como
Thank you very much, Aaron. Well, very different visions from a British guy and an Irish guy, and with the things that are going to happen in the future. Now we're going to talk about more concrete things that are related to different scenarios and wishable scenarios. And one is related to the diversity, to equality, to feminism. And in order to have this conversation about the future of feminism and how to link it with the things we've been talking before, we have Clara Serra, a philosopher and researcher. So welcome, Clara. Thank you for being here. Aaron and Mark were talking about the future changes, changing the model, this new scenario. And I think of this quote from Gramsci about the new order and the old order, and then is when we have these monsters. And I would like to talk about these monsters before talking about the feminism. You talked about one of these monsters, polarization, the death of the normies. And what's the meaning in such a polarized world? Aaron was also talking about this. And the situation in which we are of extremisms, polarization, and public discourse. Well, I think that one of the fundamental questions to talk about our democracies, if we want to have a plural, open discussion, and in which we can, and we are willing to listen to the others. And I think that feminism, to me, is this in the center of the society. So why should always be men to question this? Something that the feminism has always criticized. We've always the same ones, like heterosexuals, white men, and we have to include the ones that were excluded. So I'm just defending a plurality and the difference and the otherness. And this requires a feminist reflection from all the societies in order to have these plural discussions. And we can question if some discussions are including the differences. And also if the social media and these continents, these tools that we use in order to debate, are possibly are making these discussions possible, or if they are just creating different identities and always listening to the same ones, and the ones that we consider that are right. For example, in Twitter, I have my Twitter limited, and I only listen to the people I follow. And a lot of people do this in Twitter right now. And it is a positive tool because many discussions have a lot of lack of tolerance. But we should be able to open up these spaces to listen to everybody. Because otherwise, as a society, we are not thinking right, we are thinking wrong. So which are the tools and in which spaces and the rules of the game so that we can make this listening possible? And for example, the young generations agree or disagree with reading other mass media, listening to different opinions from their own opinion. Are we going towards these, or are we going the other way around? And I think this is a source of concern. And also talking about concerns, and some of the new ones that are arriving are also concerning. Like, for example, Italy last week. We read an interview with an artist very concerned about the situation in Italy, and he had another vision. We haven't been active enough in our reaction, and they are there because we let them be there. And if in the end, when we have these new fascisms and extremisms, it is something that concerns you, and also the presence of these new ideas in the public discussions. Yes, well, this is a very concerning scenario that the extremisms are present. But the danger is that when they arrive, extreme right parties, and we use the same things that they would use, censorship. We have to win them in a democratic way, not using what they use. So it should be like a common sense, the possibility to censor the others and not letting the others talk. And analyzing the context of the extreme right in the United States, strangely enough, the left parties in the United States and the progressive projects are the ones that are more sensitive, and in order to consider that some things shouldn't be said. So we have these far-right ideas of these defending the freedom of expression, counterculture, anti-system, and normally this belonged to the left parties. So how can this happen that the far right is the one that defend the ones who want to speak? And so the danger would be to let them occupy this space. So these rules are there, and the problem would be to have a punitive and securitarian idea, and also wanting to regulate and implementing the use of the penal code, for example, and these are the measures that the far right used to have in the past. So there are some books that say that we were not punitive enough in the past. But following your conversation and also linking it to what Aaron said about capitalism and post-capitalism, I would like to talk about this link between feminism, machismo, and capitalism. In a sector like in technology, we always say that there are not enough women, but this is not true, because we in Cadena SER, we in the 70% of the programmers in the Silicon Valley were women, and then when we see the money getting into Silicon Valley, and then salaries increase, and then women have to leave their capability to become a millionaire with the startups, and it was not technology that expelled women, it was capitalism. And we don't have a lot of women, but if you go to the assembling chains in smartphones in China, there is a big percentage of women there. And in this fight for the feminism, how is this vision of what feminism can do fighting for another model? It's not only fighting for women, but also fighting for another economic model. In the last decades, we've talked about a feminism that only looked for this equality between men and women in the labor market, and with the rules of the game, so to say. And it is doomed this type of feminism, doesn't give an alternative of a different society. If women want to occupy the same positions as men in the labor market, then I just want to be where you are. We want more women to be where men are, but without changing the games of the rules of the game. So, as you say, it is not only the presence of women, but also in the conditions and the jobs and the responsibility and the power. So it's not just changing this with our business policy, public policy, just for companies. In the end, it is also a different type of society, and rethinking profoundly the time, the care, and so it is a cross-section policy that applies all the different axes of the society. And I think that feminism in this sense is revolutionary because it questions the capitalist model if it is compatible with life and the care of people and with the things that feminism wants to put in the middle but are expelled of the public spaces, so to say. So recognition and redistribution, both things are important. And also your concept of feminism further or far beyond the identity and other minorities and all the rights another society related to the classical vindications of feminism. Well, I think that there are some feminist arguments that are focused on women. Feminism related to women only is a way to understand it. But there are other feminists that consider that feminism is also related to improving the life of the most of the people in the society. And this means that it is not just for women. It is also a better future for all of us. And one of the things about the far-right parties, which is very interesting in contemporary feminisms, is that they are also talking about the role of men in this battle. And what do men have to do? And if they are engaged or active subjects. And it's important to define a feminism in which, despite some men are going to have to give away their positions and give away some privileges, there are some liberties we have to earn for men as well. And the patriarchal system would not work without knowing the position of men and women in the society. And also the men who act differently from their society in which the genders are divided, they are also punished, these men. And these different masculinities that go or walk far away. So there is like a penalization. And so we have still to conquer these liberties for men. There are some privileges that have to be given away, and also the pluralities and different ways of being a man in a context in which the far right is just making this war even worse, and of recruiting men who are scared and angry with feminism and the disappearing of the masculinity of men. We have to do it the other way around. It's not this. It's just having more freedom, more liberty for all of us, advocating for the equality. These are men who are scared and angry. And as Mark said, I think the apocalypse is coming tomorrow. And buying spaceships to fly out of the planet Earth. So now we are going to focus on something. This new world with masculinities. And you you always mention these new masculinities and what's the meaning of these new masculinities, and also which opportunities do these new masculinities give to men in order to have this new role, and also not just focusing in the two genders and that's it. Well, there is a lot of discussion, how we call it, new masculinities, subversive masculinities. And I would say that it's not just the feminist man is bad, following these rules. This is the decalogue you need to follow and the guidelines you need to follow. I would say that we need to focus on these things that men sometimes these obligations that men sometimes fall into, this critical mindset of men towards society, and a big opportunity for them, and with different directions. And one of the main roles is that these feminist arguments don't say this is the man that you don't have to be. No, it's just there are some types of masculinities that are aggressive, that are harmful, and we need to identify them, but it is important to be positive. And one of the examples or role models of men, of how can you be as a man, and I want to say this also for kids, for boys, when we think about teenagers. So if they don't have a possible masculinity role models that are positive and very compatible with the liberties of women and wishable as well, because they have to be wishable, this is the question. I think that the far right is going to win this battle of recruiting these scared and angry men. Very interesting. So we not only need feminine role models, but also masculine role models. Thank you. Thank you very much, Clara, for being here. A round of applause. So now we are going to talk about another challenge, which is not very surprising, talking about ecology and sustainable things in the framework of the Agenda 2030. Phoebe Condori, professor of the University in Athens, many more things, but she is one of the economists that was responsible of this Agenda 2030 in the European Commission. And now with this war and the impact on the energy, many think that we have to revisit this Agenda 2030. So Phoebe from Athens, whenever you want.
Me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Hi, Phoebe. How you doing? Everything fine?
I'm good. Everything good. How are you?
Fine, fine. Great to be here with you from Barcelona. So your time to give us a brief explanation about all these wonderful things you are doing around the agenda, and of course, new things that you're working on.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and I want to talk to you about the multiple crises that we are facing simultaneously and how we can escape these multiple crises. I have some slides. I have shared them. I don't know if you can see them, but if you can, it's good. If you cannot, it's fine as well. So at the moment, we are facing the COVID crisis, the economic recession, together with inflation crisis, the climate change crisis, the biodiversity collapse crisis. We are seeing the ecosystems on which our production and consumption is based collapsing. And before the war, we had an energy crisis, an increase in demand, a reduction in supplies connected with the climate crisis because we are experiencing hot summers, cold winters, and this increases the demand. And at the same time, we have a reduction in supply that has been aggravated by the crisis, the energy crisis in China, and in 2022, even further by the geopolitical instability and the war in Ukraine. And this created a food crisis within the general population increase crisis, and of course the increased inequality between the developed world and the global south, but also increased inequality, income inequality within states. Multiple crises, we need to simultaneously handle them. The good news is that we have our blueprint. Our blueprint is the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, 17 goals about sustainability with regards to the economic system, with regards to the social system, and with regards to the interaction of these two systems with the environment. 17 goals, 169 targets. We measure the performance of each target and each goal since 2015, when the agenda was launched and signed by 193 states around the world. It's our only global agenda at the moment. And since 2015, the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network is measuring country performance with regards to these goals. And I say that this is our blueprint, this is our pathway, this sketches our pathway towards the future, because it's the only integrated, holistic, systemic framework that allows us to handle all these crises together, and allows us hope that we will be able by 2030, or more realistically by 2050, get on a sustainable development pathway. And what I just said is important. I am currently campaigning at the UN and beyond for the recognition of the fact that the goals can be fully implemented by 2050. So we need to keep them the same. The governments are integrating the goals into their agendas at the moment. They are becoming aware of the way to implement the goals. So we need to stick with them, not revise them, and just allow more time. 2050 is good enough. We can handle our crisis with a pathway that meets the goal 2050. And let me also say that this is not a fairy tale about the future. This is a blueprint, a very science-driven, systemic blueprint for identifying the investment program of each and every country, identify the investment program that is relevant to the different countries and the different characteristics of each country. I direct an Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation on IFORIA that works on research projects within 5 different research institutions. For accelerators, it is important to research and innovate, but it is equally important to incubate the innovations in order to accelerate their massive deployment in the economy and in the society. This is a technologically driven revolution. We are able to hope for sustainability by 2050 because technology has made it possible through unprecedented pace of technological advancements to make the transition. And make it possible, it means that not only we have the technology, but we have it at cost-efficient level. Renewables are now cost-efficient compared to fossil fuels. Circular economy is cost-efficient. Nature-based solutions are cost-efficient. climate adaptation projects and infrastructures and early warning systems are cost efficient. Digitalization is cost efficient. So we can we can put together the optimal mixture of these different technologies, support them with the optimal financial and fiscal measures, and at the same time support them with the optimal mixture of policies so that we really have the engagement of all the stakeholders, the financial institutions, the businesses, the policymakers, the politicians, the scientists, the technology developers, the civil society. All of them are engaged in the implementation of these solutions. Implementation is difficult. That's why we really need to engage the stakeholder, allow them ownership and co-design space of the solution pathway, and only in this way the technology that is advancing can allow us to really transform our world towards a sustainable world. And this is the message we try to share across the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, a network of more than 1,750 institutions that are trying to mobilize sustainability solutions. I lead the European hub as well as the global climate hub of this network, and we are working very closely with the European Association of Environmental and Resource Economists. This is the biggest association of resource economists in the world, with members from more than 85 different countries, and I'm honored to be the elected president of this association. So it's about the research and innovation, innovation acceleration, deep demonstration, and education, science policy interface, supported by upskilling, reskilling, and transformation of the education system to support interdisciplinarity, to support the new solutions, and to allow co-designing of the solution pathways. It is also quite hopeful that we have a lot of policies that are there to facilitate and accelerate the process. It's not just the global policies of SDGs and the Paris Agreement, it is also the leadership example of policy framework, of sustainability policy framework that we find in the EU. The European Green Deal, 2050 climate neutrality, reduction of pollution, clean tech leadership of European companies, and social cohesion, leave no one behind. And not only we are sticking, we are following the European Green Deal as our main growth strategy. We continue to do that even after the large non-linearity of COVID. In 2022, as a response to COVID, we have Next Generation EU 750 billion, in addition to the 1 trillion plus multi-annual financial framework of Europe. And this 750 billion for COVID recovery are there to finance investments in the green and digital transition. This is, for me, is a huge gain. It's a huge victory of Europe, because in this very difficult time, it sticks to the belief that sustainability, it's our only roadmap, it's our only pathway. So you can see here what are the areas where the labor force should be trained, what are the areas where we expect most investments to focus, and where we expect development and growth multipliers to be produced and job multipliers to be produced. Decarbonization of power generation and industry, promotion of circular economy, protection and restoration of biodiversity, and of course, e-mobility. And when it comes to the digital transition, we focus on improving connectivity, helping citizens, deploying digital skills, deploying cutting-edge technologies and improving cybersecurity. So this is our growth model. And in 2021, we are supporting this with many different directives, laws, and frameworks. The climate law, the first time that the commitment to climate neutrality by 2050 turns into a law, and it has been transposed into national laws as well. It's not just a European law. We have the EU taxonomy that basically changes the financial and business systems. It says that banks are going to finance with good loan terms investments that are sustainable, and sustainable investments are explicitly identified. Investments that are relevant to climate mitigation, climate adaptation, protection of biodiversity, sustainable use of water and ocean resources, and circular economy. And at the same time, we have the announcement of the Corporate Sustainability Directive that actually says that the companies are now obliged to submit the sustainability directive starting from 2023. The information that they have to report is very explicit. This information has to be quantifiable, monitored, and assessed continuously, and it has to be digitally tagged. And together with all this, we even regulate with delegated acts asset management, which basically says, the EU taxonomy says that we should have sustainability principles in all advice that we provide to our clients as asset management. And together with the EU taxonomy in 2021, we have the Fit for 55, 13 legislative proposals revising the ETS, the land use regulation, the forest strategy, the regulation of cars, vans, aviation, fuels, the regulation with regards to effort sharing, the carbon border adjustment tax, the revision of the renewable energy directive and energy efficiency directive. So this is the perfect storm of new policies. 2022, we have our anxiety to handle the situation with the war in Ukraine. And we have two big announcements. One on the digital that is separate from the goal war is Destination Earth initiative that actually announces the creation of a digital twin of the Earth in order to be able to simulate our interventions and showcase what is the best pathway with regards to natural resources development. And then we have Repower EU that is very connected with the war. It declares independence from Russian fossil fuels. I say all fossil fuels. We should be independent of all fossil fuels. Europe can be completely renewable and economizing using circular economy and energy efficiency. And it actually, through this way, it becomes self-sufficient. It has full control of its energy, and at the same time, it is also environmentally resilient and environmentally efficient. Repower EU also supports interconnectivity and supply chain security, something that was heavily disrupted by COVID, and of course, a huge investment on renewables, like we said before. So in our report on the joint financing of the SDGs and the European Green Deal, we ask the question, all the European Green Deal policies and the digital and industrial policies of Europe, do these policies support the implementation of the SDGs? And the answer is yes, especially SDGs on climate action, on industry, innovation and infrastructure, affordable and clean energy, responsible consumption and production, and decent work and economic growth. And if you want to put these SDGs relevant of the European Green Deal into transformation pathways in order to better operationalize the implementation of the SDGs, then these would be the transformations that are relevant to education, health, energy decarbonization, sustainable food, land, water, and oceans, sustainable cities and communities, and the digital revolution for sustainable development. And when we did the cross-mapping using machine learning approaches, we can find quite in a very explicit and vivid way that transformation 4 and 3 on sustainable use of natural resources and energy decarbonization are very much supported by the European Green Deal policies if they are fully implemented. The digital transformation and the transformation of cities and community, let's so, but with regards to social cohesion, transformation on education, gender inequality, health, welfare, and demography, we are less powerful as European Green Deal. And this is the message of this talk. The message is that we need to be investing also on social cohesion, no big transformation, and this is an unprecedented transformation that we are requesting from our socioeconomic system. No big transformation is ever possible without social cohesion. And this is the exact reason that we need to assess our investments that derive from the need to implement the European Green Deal. We need to assess them against the SDGs, which is a more holistic framework and takes into account social cohesion and more. We also find that the European Green Deal facilitates the European semester process, facilitates the implementation of the SDGs. I don't have time to detail the results, but it's 72% alignment between the semester process recommendations across the 27 countries of Europe and the low performance with regards to SDG is found, which means that there is an alignment between the semester process and the SDGs. And with regards to the RFRs, do the National Recovery and Resilience Plans facilitate the implementation of the SDGs? Well, we find that they do, but mostly facilitate green energy, electrification of transport, and energy efficiency, whereas we find major problems with regards to the implementation of the SDGs that are relevant to food systems, diets, and biodiversity. So a note here that further cohesion fund should be invested on these areas and not just on green energy. And a final note, how do we make our finance sustainable? How would we really integrate the sustainability directive? Well, we have to integrate the value of natural capital and human capital in our cost-benefit decisions. And it is proven in our work that in any investment, 99% of investments, production relevant investments, natural capital has the biggest monetary value, which unfortunately goes unnoticed because natural capital is not easily traded in markets because it is not easy to have explicit property rights for natural capital. So what we do, we decompose natural capital into ecosystem, services, provisioning, regulating, culture, and capital, and use econometric methods to monetize the value these services provide to the economy. And we did this for the whole of Europe, for terrestrial, marine, and freshwater ecosystems, for the 14 different biogeographical and marine regions in Europe. And what we find is the marginal willingness to pay for increases in the quality or quantity of ecosystem services per household, per country, and not just that. We find that the countries that have high performance with regards to SDGs that are relevant to nature, 13, 14, 15, are the countries that are really more willing to pay for natural capital. So I'm going to close this presentation with the message that irrespective of whether you are a company or a private company or a public company, it is crucial to really identify the total economic value of the capital that you are using and decide on the benefits of an investment based on that. And this is also important for ESG performance of companies. ESG performance should be combined with financial performance. There is no company that can exist without profit. So if you are looking into a full implementation of the sustainability transition and the sustainability directive for companies, you should first allow the companies to understand that those with sound ESG performance also have good financial performance, lower systemic risk, improved profit margins, and better returns. And it is important to identify the pathway that will allow the companies to combine, to develop a hybrid matrix that allows them to jointly assess and monitor and report their financial performance together with their footprint on the environment, on society and governments. And this can be done through the SDGs framework, and we have developed a three-step approach that goes through identification, development, assessment, and monitoring that does exactly that. So please, on this note, I'm gonna stop. Please do not separate ESGs and financial returns. Companies in the private sector, in the public sector, PPPs have a mandate for profit, but at the same time, they need to adhere to the ESG framework. So we should holistically and systemically allow them to do that jointly. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Bobby.
Thank you.
Bye, bye. Bueno, vamos a continuar con este tema porque yo creo que es...
Let's continue with this topic, because apart from the 2030 agenda, we're starting to have technologies that can also contribute to solve these challenges that we have as a planet and as a species. Some people call it green revolution, green technology revolution, and we have to talk about this. We have Lucas Aragueña. Let's go to talk about CO2, which is one of the main challenges. They say we produce 5 tons of CO2 per capita. When you multiply this for the world population, is a lot. It's 9 gigatons. Bill Gates has claimed that we have to move from million of tons to 0, and there's not a point in between. And on the news, we've seen the effects of CO2 on various pathologies. So CO2 amounts to lives as well. So what do you propose to face this challenge with this green technological revolution? Maybe you're not aware that on average, each European citizen generates 5 tons of CO2 per year. Maybe you don't think you do, because I just go to work, I take my kids to school. Where do all these CO2 tons come from? Well, we had this climate emergency, and it's not only Bill Gates who's saying this, but also 157 countries that signed the Paris agreements. We need to feed ourselves in an scenario that prevents the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. How are we going to achieve this net zero horizon in 30 years? So we wish to see this in our lifetimes, right? But we see we've become addicted to CO2 because CO2 is involved in every human activity. That's why we have 15 tons per every American citizen. Then we're talking about investment in renewables and solar panels. But today, globally, 84% of the energy is fossil fuels. If we are to change this figure from 84% to zero in 30 years time, we need a green technological revolution. And as in every revolution, there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. And the new world coming out of this voyage is going to be quite different from the one we've seen for the last 80 years, where we have been building all this infrastructure based on fossil fuels. We're going to be moving from monocrop or monotechnology or monotheistic economy, because fossil fuels are like a god for us, to a wider range spectrum. For example, in transportation or mobility, today 99% of the mobility is based on fossil fuels, internal combustion engines, therefore, and we're going to be seeing electric vehicles, but also hydrogen power vehicles, but also biofuel-based engines. And we're going to have this for different applications. It might be surprising that people in a bank have engineers working on that. You have identified these groups of main technologies that can contribute to this path to net zero. Tell us about these new technologies and give us specific examples of companies that are already working on specific things. In our bank, we have a commitment to help our customers throughout this complicated transition. After these green revolutions, we're going to have winners and losers, and our commitment is to give advice to our clients when making decisions on these technologies. For example, if you have a bus company, what can I do? Hydrogen or batteries? Then we have technical experts in 6 technologies that we have identified that we think are the ones that are going to be allowing us to achieve this net zero target. And this innovation is going on in the startups world, also in big companies as well. This is not the monopoly of startups, of course. And we are seeing fascinating technologies emerging. I can give you a few examples. Give us at least one example. I don't know, carbon capture or things like that. Yes, we're seeing lots of things. These technologies go from hydrogen, biofuels, batteries, food tech. How are we going to be able to produce proteins in a different way? Because we have a very inefficient way of doing it. And we're seeing companies, a number of them in Spain. It's not a monopoly of any country. And we have in Spain a lot of innovation in that field. And a recent one, is a company that basically, when you see the gases emitted by a smokestack, you see CO2, which is a greenhouse gas, as you know. You have NOx's and sulfides. Imagine a technology that can capture all these toxic gases we are dumping in the atmosphere and transform this into oxygen and biofuels. For example, renewable diesel fuel. It would be magic using waste to produce things you need, oxygen and biofuels. This technology, how does it work? You take the smoke from a stack, for example, a carbon plant or a cement plant. You let the gases cool down. You introduce them into a photobioreactor, which is two transparent plates that contain water with microalgae, and these algae take or consume these gases. They use them as food, and since the plates are transparent, they use photosynthetic processes. They take the energy from the sun and they generate energy from these gases, and they reproduce very quickly. So then you remove the algae, you reintroduce the water, and you use this biomass as fuel, for example, renewable biodiesel. And this is an innovation, as many other I could give you. Phoebe was saying that a company needs to be sustainable for the environment, but also economically. And one of the things I want you to tell me is that, of course, we need innovation and new technologies, new ideas, but also we need to be able to industrialize them. We need to be able to build an industry around them. So how do you see this industrial operation after innovation being able to incorporating into the economy this added value? Yes, this is crucial, and it's being discussed in Europe today. Innovation, in order to be impactful, needs to be industrialized. Therefore, this technology revolution is causing an industrial revolution. Let me give you an example. If we talk about batteries, for example, batteries used to be assembled in Europe, but they were produced in China because we don't know how to make them here. But now in Europe we have 40 mega factories. It is an investment around 60 billion euros of capex investment that is going to be developed throughout this decade. 800,000 jobs will be created to serve an industry that didn't exist before. In a decade, we're going to build and consolidate an industry from scratch, which is extraordinary. We're looking up to Northvolt, for example, that manufacture batteries, which was founded in 2006, and now it's capitalized in 12 billion euros. That's one of the main companies of IBEX. It will be in the top part of IBEX 35 stock market classification. So this energy transition or revolution that Phoebe mentioned before must not be only Europe assembling solar panels made in China. This must be a revolution that generates added value and jobs. Phoebe also made a call to action for companies to participate in this transformation. Innovation is not only come from startups, but also comes from big companies. You, as a big bank, what is your commitment as a company in this green revolution? Big companies are not being expectant, just watching what's going on, but they're joining this revolution because big companies have realized that this change is a challenge, but it can create a lot of value. So on the one hand, they are developing their own labs to develop their own technology, to have their proprietary technology. And on the other hand, they are very, very, very active when doing acquisitions and incorporating these tech startups, these climate tech companies that are emerging. We are seeing around 200 new venture capital being created every year, that before invested more in digitalization and technology, and now they're moving to climate tech to tackle the climate challenges, to reduce CO2 emissions. And we are seeing some corporate venture capital with huge investment capitals, Amazon, Shell, to invest in startups, just as invest in startups. That means that big companies are taking a step on this field, This revolution is interesting with this industrial part and this technological part from the big companies with their commitment with the climate. So thank you for being here, for telling all this. As Lucas said, we have companies in Spain working on innovation. We have companies in Barcelona as well, and we wanted to invite 2 of these companies to help us understand what they're doing. This climate tech innovation is enertech, some people say, from a local approach. 2 companies with different approaches that we thought it would be interesting to have them here today, to listen to them. We have Bio Bound for Blue. We have Pablo Vidarte and Cristina Alexandre, co-founder of Bound for Blue. Welcome, please take a seat. Sit whatever you like. So, 2 very different companies, although you both work in Barcelona and you work around the field of energy. I would like to know what you do. And tell me, Cristina, let's begin with you, talking about this challenge that maritime transport is one of the big polluters in the planet, and only a few boats, just 15 or 16 boats, can pollute more than all the cars in the planet. Against this, Bound for Blue is fighting with their huge sails. So the maritime sector, as you say, is a big pollutant in terms of NOx's and sulfur dioxides, and regulations are being applied to force them to use more efficient fuels. It is a problem because the main cost is fuel, and which is basically maritime grade diesel. And we propose to start using air, or the wind, sorry. Why don't we use a free renewable resource such as wind? You don't need to store it, you need any space to store it, and you don't need to invest in any infrastructure. This sort of technology uses wind to help drive the boat. You reduce the use of fuel up to 40%. Of course, if there's no wind, it's 0. But on average, it's 25% savings. So your sails are not the standard sails. They are aluminium sails that are controlled in a very sophisticated manner. Please tell us a little bit more about these sails. Well, these sails are inspired by Jacques Cousteau, you know, the guy with a red hat. In the 80s, he created a turbo sail. This sail uses suction to create a lot of thrust. This sail generates between 6 and 7 times more thrust than the wing of a plane. The cost is very low, and this technology has been revisited using automation. They are foldable, they use rigid materials and optimize mechanisms to reduce costs, and at the end you have a very efficient sail. It's autonomous, very cheap, and you just push a button and you get a saving of around 25% of your fuel. And these boats transport 90% of all the goods in the world. So 90% around you has come here on a boat. 90% of everything that we have around us has been on a boat once, at least once. Let's see what Pablo has to say. BOO, you use wind as BO uses, a new energy. Bio-based energy is not as common. So tell us what's your proposal to try to save this planet. What we do at BO is bio-based batteries. Imagine in a city having a park or a garden and using these systems underground without impacting the environment, natural environment, and being able to power all the lampposts of that area, or even the surrounding buildings. This can be installed in vegetable rooftops and hanging gardens, and this is based in a basic thing. Any bit of land has microorganisms that digest organic matter, and then they generate electrons. We can capture these electrons to generate not only energy, electricity, but also water. It's H2O. And literally, it's like having a microverse of living beings working for you, without them knowing, of course. So this is using nature for something else than just to make our cities greener. It's a transformation that goes beyond sustainability. It is a biotechnological transformation to create the first biotechnological cities and buildings. I'm saying we want to do it, but we are already doing it. We've been 7 years doing this. So that's what I wanted to know. How far are we to being able to charge our cell phone on a flower pot, or or using other devices? Well, we're doing that already. This is something that since 2015 we've been doing R&D, and during the last year we have been creating the first biotechnology buildings. Next year there are going to be a lot more. For example, here in Barcelona we're going to see a few of them. And it's what you said, is something as simple as plugging in your cell phone to nature. We have that. We have benches, there's a vegetable area around it, and you can plug your cell phone and charge it there. And we've done many other experiences like this. Our second headquarters is in Ibiza. This is the only biotech botanical garden. It is a great space where we are recreating very extreme natural environments and forests, and we do pilots with all the technologies we have, and we try crazy things, such as generating music, creating music through nature. And David Guetta came to play this instrument we created. So imagine all the applications in a city. We have a very interesting one, which is a living library. It's not a library with walls and books. It's like a forest where we can store the memory of humanity in nature. You can go there, generate energy, and illuminate the area. You can touch a plant and listen to messages for the next generations. You can make plants talk, so to speak. So we gathered together a lot of technologies to create very transforming projects, not only to transform our cities, but our way of thinking. We've been discussing with Pacha discotheque that have their headquarters both in Barcelona and Ibiza too. So it's very interesting, where there's a lot of investment in this field, and I would like to know what's your experience, because you didn't have an easy beginning, right? How was your funding process? Do you feel that now, with European funds and this renewed concern for these topics, and venture capitals are more interested in you? So tell us, Christina, how's your experience? Well, at the beginning, we were just the crazy guys that wanted to start using sales again. And we had to overcome all this resistance, of course, and in the funding side as well. It's basically an industrial company, a hardware company. There were no funds investing in the maritime sector, which has been a long time without innovation, and all technology innovation in the sailing sports don't end up in the industrial field. And we got some business angels, some public funding from Catalonia and Cantabria, and then we had some family offices and corporate investors. But recently we are currently in an open round for 18 million. Half of it is going to come from ISC Accelerator funds. So we've seen a change, and people is more and more open. But back in 2015, it was not easy. And what about Bio? You've been doing research and development for years without having a specific product. How has this trip been during this working with these venture capital investment funds? Yeah, we were just crazy people back then, and I've been involved in many types of projects: artificial intelligence, external combustion engines, things like that. But biotech was not my thing until I did. And we started from a simple starting point. Bio batteries. This is something that was known, but if you use it outdoors, it is contaminated and stops working. But we have been able to create a system that can survive for decades. At the beginning, I had to create a team with volunteers doing prototypes. It was biologists, computer scientists, etc. And the first prototypes were great because we could do this first funding round, but it was a leap of faith, of course, for all the investors we had. And after that, something similar happened to us. We had the support from the European Union to fund our projects. And actually, Christina and me met in the European Parliament because we were awarded a prize. It was the top 50 most innovating companies. And from that, we were able to take one more step. Once we had these industrializable and replicable bio batteries, it was easier. The funding rounds were easier. Getting EU funds was easier. So now we have a commercial line and we are invoicing. But at the beginning it was hard work. And now it's a great moment because we not only have this urban line, we're going to launch a farming line which needs funding. But we don't have time for anything else. You have great stories to tell that were covered in the El País newspaper. Thank you very much for being here, not only for being here and having these great projects like Bound for Blue and BO. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Pues hablaba Pablo de microverse.
So Pablo was talking about microverse, and I didn't know this word. Now we are going to move to metaverse, which is a more common word. So it is one of the buzz words that is going to define the future of internet, and together with another concept, the tokens and the economy, the tokens economy. And the best guest to talk about this is Chema Alonso, Chief Digital Officer of Telefónica. He's in Madrid. And I think he's already online. Well, I've been listening to you and I'm really enjoying, and I really love it. And we are going to take a good look on the startups that you mentioned from Wayra, so that we can give the support. Yes, yeah, you in Wayra have to give support to it. So let's start with the metaverse. We've been talking about trends and we haven't talked about the metaverse. We were just waiting for you. So what's the metaverse going to give us? You from Telefónica are already working on that, and our question is too little, too soon. That's not as amazing as what we had before. So what's the metaverse going to add to the future? Well, you have explained it very well. And we've seen these images of the metaverse so shocking that when you start using it, and moreover, we in our generation, our age, we find that the experiences are not fully created. So what they sold us, being in a concert, 1,000 people connected, internet is not ready yet to support this type of experiences. But if your question is if this is going to be a reality, well, the answer is quite easy. There are two golden rules. Is to follow what the youngs do, because they are going to be the leaders of internet. They are going to lead the internet wherever they want it to go. So I remember when it started, social media, who's going to explain their private life and internet when everybody, and also the investments in the metaverse and this revolution of this Web3 is amazing. Back in 2021, venture capitals invested 20,000 million money in cybersecurity and 27 million more in Web3, economic, blockchain, metaverse, etc. So I think this is a revolution, an unstoppable revolution. So you were talking about Web3 and the token economy, and something that I find really interesting. And I think that in the short run, it is going to define how we build the value in internet. How do you see this move towards the token economy? Well, people thought that the token economy was related to the crypto growth and cryptocurrency. It's like the currency exchange corner shop. The token-based economy is a reaction to this transformation in internet because of a need, because we have big companies that succeeded in Web 2, and the new unicorn companies want to compete with them and want to create new experiences. And the way to fight against these companies that were successful during the digitalization is to accelerate this digitalization through sharing the value that is generated using tokens. So if the service of this company grows, everybody who participated in making this company grow are going to receive their tokens, and they are going to capture the value. And the token is growing at the same pace that the company is. And this allows us to have a lot of digital unicorn companies created in this economy. This is the future, the evolution, and we don't see companies without this tokenomics model. And the winners of Web 2 are giving away these tokens, and it is something that is going to stay, and we are going to see it even more. And in a few years, token for a living, so doing things and receiving tokens is going to be our everyday life. So you in Telefonica, in the metaverse and in the tokenization and Web3, you are doing a lot of different things, investing in companies, alliances, and rethinking your business model in this environment. So tell me things that are not secret for the company. Well, we are going to receive a big impact of this revolution, because what we were doing before was just digitalizing companies. But when the web arrived, we started having digital companies, companies that live out of technology. And technology has four parts: data, computing interface, and communications. And so that the evolution of the metaverse can truly work, we need to deploy new networks and low latency technologies, broadband, Wi-Fi 6, 5G standalone, fiber to the place, fiber to the room. And we need to have more powerful. We need edge computing and algorithm of social media. When you like on a video and a picture, there is an artificial intelligence for each one of the users that is retrained with the data in 20 minutes. So since you press like until the artificial intelligence surveying you gives you offer and uses this click in order to make a decision about the content you're going to see. That's only 20 minutes. And this requires a computing power that is amazing. And then for the new services creator, we need to think networks in a different way. So it's not just a new configuration of a new network with a new account. Now all networks should be programmable and real time, so that any developer could use it with just one line, code line. And to us, it is a total disruption, and we have to be present. And also, something that is going to happen when we see an accumulation of technologies. We accumulate after a lot of technology with new digital services. It happened with the web, with the .com and the broadband and the data-driven platforms, with the social media, and thanks to the cloud computing and the big data and the mobile world. And now it's going to happen again. So now we are trying to use our innovation vehicles, internal innovation and open innovation, as you said, Jaime, to see which are the services that are going to appear in the future. This is why we are focusing on tokenization and cryptocurrency and digital experiences. So tell me something about these services for the future that you are preparing. Don't leave us like that. Well, we started with the idea to create a system of tokens to kind of like an award for the users. Sometimes the user sees the match in the smartphone, but if they use the desktop, they have a guaranteed quality. So we give them tokens, we give them like awards or prizes that they can use as money in Telefonica. It's a point system. It's not a cryptocurrency, but they can use it in Telefonica. There are 200,000 users of Telefónica in Spain who use this token. So this was an internal experience. And then using Wira, our first and most important investment company. We have invested on Helium, in Crossman, which is a startup, in the NFTs. It is going to be a revolution that is going to be here in 2 to 3 years' time. We have invested in Metasoc and in Gamium, and also in cryptocurrency. A wonderful company here in Spain, Bit2Me, and they are doing an amazing work in order to normalize the token economy and regulate it, and also an acquisition agreement of Imascono company, a company from Zaragoza, doing immersive experiences and cognitive services, talking, immersive, virtual reality, mixed reality. And this is what we are doing, and we will continue following these lines because we see that it will be more winners in the future. In the past, Oracle, some microsystem were the winners, and then in Web 2 we have other companies as Facebook or Twitter or Netflix or Amazon. So now in Web 3, with decentralized companies and autonomous companies, we are going to see different winners. And we want to be there because we've been here for 100 years and we want to be there in the future and help them build it. So to finish, because you build this future from the network, which is going to be fundamental for this deployment, and also with your customers, helping them to use these trends. And why companies should also pay attention to what's going on in Web3 and the token economy and the metaverse? Well, mainly because we see all these different companies with different business models and different ways of making traditional services, and they are growing very rapidly, and it can be very useful using tokenomics, companies that are worth billions, and using the token economy in the retail, and also the digitalization of the second-hand cars. And now it is an app, and you can find it, and just with one click you can receive it. So the disruption that is here with these Web3 technologies, artificial intelligence, it's going to have an impact on all of that. And I think it's going to be the next blockbuster, or, Sun Microsystem, the next Sun Microsystem, yeah. So thank you very much for being here with us. See you soon. Hugs from Barcelona. Bye. Always interesting and fun listening to Chema, and this message that when we have different business models, you should pay attention because you don't want your business model to be destroyed. And I know we are making jokes with the companies of others. I'm sorry. So we've been talking about the metaverse, but we are going to talk about something different, the rural environment and the emptied Spain, as it is called. We have Hannah Lopez-Pagan, General Director for Ecologic Transition and Demographical Challenge. I'm going very fast because we are behind the schedule. So please join us on the stage. Hello, how are you? I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for being here. We are talking about future. We've been talking about technology, and it seems that we can work from anywhere. And during the pandemic, it seemed that all the villages were going to be filled with people working remotely. But the figures of the cities are increasing, and it seems that the future is going to be for the cities. So what can we do to stop this, or just trying to vertebrate it? Well, that's a very difficult question. From the metaverse, from the village verse, and yeah, the microverse, the metaverse, and the village verse. Well, mainly, I would say that the future belongs to the cities because it has belonged to the future for the past. But cities have different choices, and it depends on what you live, on where you live. And I think that we've learned a lot of lessons during the pandemic as individuals and as a society. And we observe the territory in a different way. And it is very important not to oppose the rural and the metropolitan aspects, and looking for cooperation and collaboration. So the opportunity is the virtuous circle. So urban cannot exist without the urban, and the urban cannot exist without the rural. So we are facing a challenge, and it is not just saving the micro, but also being aware of the responsibilities that we have. And big cities as Barcelona, I live in Madrid, I am from Murcia, but I've been working for many years in order to help the small municipalities facing a lot of challenges. So we have to use the technology and the effort at the service of a society independently of where they live. Maybe we can be rural and urban at the same time. And now we have this opportunity. And also breaking these ideas of trying to break these images. But innovation is taking place in the villages in order to break these cliches, and it is easier to do it in the system, in the cities. The innovation ecosystems, the exchange of ideas is very big because there are a lot of people coexisting and a lot of facilitators. And now we need to have these facilitating environments in other territories. And it's not the same to generate an innovation hub in a small village of 1,000 inhabitants than in a 20,000 inhabitants city. So from the government of Spain, what we are trying to boost is to break these cliches and to invest in a development model that is fair and sustainable, because this model of concentration of people, investment and services, it's not a reality only in Spain. It's all over the planet. It's a trend, and we can see it everywhere. We need to be aware that it is harmful for the society. So we need to generate these polycentric systems and not concentrating everything on the same place, because we are missing something, our own identities, complementary identities. And to create these environments is a priority from the government of Spain, and also to look for models that need more support. So it's not only the villages, but also intermediary cities. And a goal of the government of Spain is the decentralization as one of the main goals. So doing things outside Madrid and outside Barcelona, because apart from Madrid and Barcelona, there are many more places to do things. How can we start articulating this decentralization and the artificial intelligence agency is going to be located somewhere else, not in Barcelona or in Madrid. That's a good step. Well, Spain is a country which is not centralized at all. I would say it's one of the countries in the world that is most decentralized. The decentralization means development, and the decision-making process is close to the citizens. But sometimes we are not aware. And now we need to improve this decentralization process. And we need resources. So when you want to boost these public policies, you need a strategical framework, a regulatory framework, and a budget. And in Spain, we need to guarantee that these resources are going to be better distributed and that we do not focus and concentrate everything in these centers with the elite. So I have a lot of things in my mind about connectivity and capacity building, but the digital breach is increasing. So decentralization and the relocation process of the government is aiming at creating different poles or different hubs in different places of Spain. So there are a lot of levels of the administration that don't need to be in Madrid. They can be in Seville and Bilbao and Valencia, and other levels of the administration should be in the smaller cities. And so that the citizens feel that the central government, the state government, are close to them. Another interesting mission that you have is talking about these new activities that can be done in the rural environment, and also the modernization of the agriculture. Agriculture can be innovative. Agriculture is innovative, craftsmanship, local production, and many other things that are linked to villages, but are also being modernized. Well, I think that here there are different generations and very different backgrounds. And in Spain, we have modernized and we have trained ourselves. So there are a lot of people in the territory. I'm using the word territory because I think it's more including. It includes the rural environment and much more, right? It is vertebration between rural and urban and intermediary. And there are a lot of people who really devote themselves to the professions which are not strictly linked to the rural sphere. And with the remote working, this gives a lot of possibilities, but not only this. There are a lot of initiatives and opportunities that go far beyond the traditional professions that we need to preserve because we really need them for our food supply and the traditional activities. So we see a lot of innovation, but they need a support and a bigger boost. These people who have these capabilities, that skills, and they also need the private investment, which is more efficient and focusing on sustainability, human and environmental sustainability. So you are talking about sustainability, human, social, and environmental. So apart from the demographic challenge, you're talking about the transition, ecological transition. So how do you link it, the vertebration of the territory and then being sustainable? Well, it is a challenge in a challenge, because sometimes people ask me if the demographic challenge has to be in our Ministry of Ecological Transition. And I think the answer is yes. I think ecological transition is not an option, it's an obligation. And we have all committed to it, and we don't have another alternative. Although this is going to mean difficult costs that we have to explain to the territory. And I've been working in cooperation for the development, and I think that it's important to talk about the coherence of policies. So these policies of better operation of the territory in coherence with this transition. I can give you an example. And I suppose you all remember when we think about transition, we think about renewable energies, and we think about wind energies, and PV energies, and green hydrogen. But the territory needs to feel that they are not just another resource, that they are also going to win from that. That it's a win-win situation, and it is a process in which the big cities need to respect the villages, because thanks to them they survive. So our territory, renewable energies, wind, PV, have to be at the service of generating this transition for everyone, not only for just a few. So we need to fight against inequalities, opportunity inequality for the citizens. So that's why we say a fair energy transition, right? And also something which is very interesting, the vertebration of the territory, these renewable energies, and this extractive vision from the rural environments of before they consider themselves just a place to extract the grain from, and now to extract the renewable sources. So how can we guarantee that someone who lives close to these wind farms or PV farms, they are participating into this transition? Well, I think that dialogue is paramount, and to promote governance. I think, well, it's a word that we use a lot in public policies, but governance is just looking for a consensus, being respectful and listening to all the different stakeholders to reach an agreement, and the transparency as well. But in the traceability of the decision, why we do this, and how we can make decisions, and why is this so important? It's so important because it is something that Professor Rodriguez Pose and about the inequalities, he talks about this lack of happiness, and I was listening to Clara, and she was talking about gender, and we will not have a cohesion without a gender perspective, and also this geography of the dissatisfaction, this unhappiness can be seen everywhere. So there is this lack of understanding, the questioning of the institutions and the questioning of the democracy. And this is why we need to be smart enough and from the administrations and from other spaces, as the mass media, for example, because you help to make these things visible, and a consolidation of actions that need long-term ideas. So we need to build these state policies that transcend our generation, but not our society. Yes, this idea of these gaps, these bridges, and these rural women, for example, with a lot of in the intersection of different bridges, and about these concrete policies that you are creating in order to vertebrate this territory in this fair transition and the gender perspective. Well, as you said, we are behind the schedule, so I'm just going to use headlines. Department is new, and it is the first time that the government of Spain fosters these policies, but then we need to have a narrative and a strategy behind, and also to make your actions match with the information that you have. And so I think that we have established some pillars so that the next generations can continue with the things we have started. But I'm going to underline two things. First of all, that we wanted to have a look at the territory face to face. The local governments have a role to develop and to create initiatives that we can boost from the different municipalities of all sizes with the functionality of the territory in mind, and also the answer to this initiative, and also at the service of the territory, more than 1,000 projects of different types of initiatives, very innovative, brave, and valuable. And to us, this call for proposals has been a milestone. And in these ones, we're identifying the territory as a priority. Normally, these call for proposals or the policies are based on mobility, youth, healthcare. But to us, the priority was the transformation of the territory. And it's been an important step. And let me finish with these, a very small but beautiful thing that can change this concept, a program that we started, Campus Rural Campus, so that the young people can be interns in the rural world with 1,500 students who wanted to join it. So this shows the interest to know the territory. The young generation very committed with the ecological transition and very committed to the vertebration of the territory and the social cohesion. Well, thank you very much, Juana. Sorry for the velocity because we went really fast, but I think we are going to have more opportunities to keep on talking. Thank you very much. So we are going to talk about the elephant in the room, and we are going to talk about this in the near future: security, defense, and Europe feeling that many of the things that they had forgotten they shouldn't have. We're going to talk about defense innovation with two companies that are leader and two women who lead this innovation process. Belén García, the Vice President of Technology in Airbus, and Isabel González, Director of Indra Digital Lab. So whenever you want, please join me on the stage. A round of applause.
Ya se nota que el efecto del café ha ido bajando donde queráis.
The effect of the caffeine has been wearing down, so it's okay. As we were saying, one of the topics is taking security and defense more seriously and increasing the investment in those companies involved in security and defense. We have two women that are experts in this field. Let me take the opportunity to ask you about it. We are now talking about defense again in Europe because we feel that our democracies are being threatened and a lot of things have been changing. Belén, does it make sense that Europe is thinking about investing more in areas that could be a challenge for our way of life? Well, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me. I'm not so happy because I'm the last one, but it's not your fault anyway. I've been 22 years working in the aerospace and defense security fields. I'm still young though. But the reality is that these fields are strategic, are fundamental. Maybe we don't realize, but most of the technologies we use on a daily basis come from the field of defense and security, such as GPS or the internet. So obviously, investing in innovation in security and defense has a real application because it is applicable from the get-go. It is applicable in the private industry, and the solutions can be industrialized. Therefore, it is strategic from a technological point of view. Yeah, you mentioned many of the points we're going to be discussing in this session. You were talking about innovation, of course, and also you talked about industry. As Lucas mentioned before, this is one of the topics that's been mentioned throughout the day, and it has a lot to do with your work. But Belén, going back to the question I made at the beginning, after this renewed presence in the general debate that maybe a few years ago couldn't have been politically justifiable, investing in defense, I mean, why do you think that there is this renewed interest in investing in defense, and why you think this can be beneficial for our country, Europe, and society in general? Well, it's not a renewed interest only. It's also a renewed social awareness, because I also have been in this field 20 years. And when I talk to my sister, for example, she's not aware we have this problem. So defense and security help us have safe and secure societies. But the current geopolitical situation makes us more visible, because we see the challenge, we see the threat. But there's another threat as well. We've seen this in the various interventions we've had today when talking about cognitive interventions and all these technologies. The role of a secure society, a society that is respectful with differences and that allow people, all human beings, to express their rights, is a very real threat. So the solutions we offer is very real, and it's so easy to start a cognitive campaign through the social media, and this can cause a lot of confusion in the civil world. But at the end of the day, technologies, as Belén said, have been developed, have been pioneered by the defense sector, and now there is this technological and digital disruption. There are many other technologies that are being developed by the civil society. Quantum computing, artificial the intelligence, edge computing, etc. All these technologies together with more classical skills such as electronics and microelectronics allow us to have secure and safe societies in a more and more complex environment. If we were going to forecast the future, we could have an apocalyptic future, but at least we need to have the resources. So you both mentioned innovation and how many times some of the great inventions we have today come from the defense world. We mentioned Matsukato, talking about this man on the moon, and sometimes we forget all the things that brought a man on the moon that come from the defense industry. Actually, 90% of astronauts came from the army. So what innovations we're seeing today, you think are going to have an impact on defense, but also can be the next generation in this technologies we're going to find in a more civil environment? What innovations do you think that can contribute to other realities? Well, the digital component has a lot of impact, and there's a huge gap there. For example, in artificial intelligence, that can lead us to a point of no return when the operational capacities of a defense industry from another can make you reach this point of no return. But beyond the digital field, we're talking communication and computing, quantum computing, etc. I think we need to focus on new generation sensorics, new capacities in radio frequency, electronic intelligence, radar systems, all these components that have very complex computing architectures are now in a very complex moment. And it's not normal because these technologies take longer to mature. But now we have this convergence between this shortened maturity period together with digital technologies that have shorter periods and a higher frequency. What innovations, Isabel, do you think you've been working in other fields that can be exported to other sectors? Well, let me tell you a couple of technologies. The first one, which you might have in your minds, is cybersecurity. It's a dual technology, but for a company such as Airbus, we've been working since the 80s in international environments with projects such as Eurofighter that require maximum security. So we've been already working on protecting the data we were exchanging between countries before this was called cyber. This made us develop technologies that we used to use internally for the company, and now we started to use them with our customers. The portfolio and the potential of this and the business of we've been able to develop with this technology, and we continue to develop it. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, when hospitals were collapsed, there were massive cyber attacks on hospitals in Europe, and the European Union realized that they had to protect them. And the program for the health sector, for cyber protection of the health sector, has been coordinated by Airbus, which must be surprising. So cybersecurity is a technology that is critical because, as Isabel mentioned, we're moving towards digitalization, and the only way digitalization can be successful is to protect ourselves. And the second example is related with the background we have here. It would be great if it was green. The second point is technologies that are related to sustainability. Can we change to a green background? I like this one because you can listen to a Joy Division LP. Yes, we have the green background now. This is great. So sustainability, let me tell you, it's not only hydrogen and being autonomous and energy autonomous and energy sovereign. Europe is focusing on hydrogen. We will have a hydrogen plane by 2030. And in the short term, we are working on other ways to being more sustainable. SAF fuels and other ways to be more sustainable with incremental technologies that can increase our efficiencies. Lucas, talking about sustainability in the Green Revolution, was saying that we need innovation, and innovation being built into an industrialized model, because otherwise it is not economically feasible. So this has to do with some of the challenges we've been suffering lately. During the COVID pandemic, we realized we were able to manufacture a lot of things. We were not able to manufacture a lot of things. And now with the war in Ukraine, maybe we're realizing that we cannot work a lot more things. So as two European companies that manufacture products in Europe, how important in your industrial model is guaranteeing that Europe is again investing in a cleaner, more sustainable industry and investing in this European industry again. Well, right now, I think it's very relevant, not only at an industrial level, well, I'm sure because we work together and know that this happens in Airbus as well. In Indra, it happens as well. And I think it is very relevant, not only at an corporate level and at a European level as well, as has been mentioned today in several occasions. In Europe, people is concerned and they have an action plan to revert this situation. But at Indra, following the words of Aaron, but with a less pessimistic approach, we don't have infinite resources, we don't have infinite talent, and we don't have a perfect capacity to recover competitive capacity in the European arena, because there are strategic resources and we know how fragile we are and how systemic this situation can become. And it's just a matter of finding the right opportunity. The resources are not infinite, and we need to be honest to ourselves. We need to be honest to see where we can have a competing edge and where not. We are participating, we're collaborating with Airbus and other partners in the Industrial Alliance to promote the adoption and industrial development to materialize this of edge, cloud and data at a European level. And on this field, there's a need to implement segmentation and a technological sovereignty, which is essential. But we need to decide where we focus, because it doesn't make sense to become hyperscalers overnight. Are we going to be able to do it as a continent? So we have to decide where we focus on. Energy is one of the main areas we should be focusing on. Also aviation and space. Those are two of the sectors with a greater capacity to have this discrimination and to take advantage of the opportunities and resources we have as a continent and to prevent fragmentations. You mentioned sovereignty. This is one of the words of the year. We discussed with Cristina Garmendia talking about technological sovereignty. This strategic autonomy is not only based on economic factors, but there are many others that go beyond that, and it has to do with the protection of your way of life. And one of them is cybersecurity. We forget that we used to have cybersecurity companies, and we've been losing them. But the UK still have very big cybersecurity companies. And Chema always says that if you're not a wolf in cybersecurity, you're a lamb. And in this industry, you need to be a wolf, right? How do you see this from Airbus? This concept of sovereignty, autonomy in those areas where Europe has to invest, even though sometimes it's hard to justify the investment, just to keep our position. If we are to maintain this sovereignty, this autonomy, both in strategic and industrial terms in Europe, this means that Europe writes its own fate. If we are to write our own fate, we need to work on 4 pillars that are strategic. First, energy. We talked about it before. Second, industry. During the pandemic, it was chaos because we didn't have the key industries to make the PPE and the ventilators we needed. We need to have an industrial core, of course, and have the knowledge and flexibility to be able to replan and rethink and adapt our industry depending on the situation. Third, materials. Materials are rare. We are gonna need to recycle them then and promote circular economies and look for alternatives. And here Europe has to work and invest on materials that we need to replace these scarce materials that they might come from space. And the fourth point, being the technology director of my company, is the most important is technology itself. We need to invest in technology, and we need to be at the forefront and have more flexible regulations in Europe to be able to try artificial intelligence. It's not developed, and we are already regulating on it. So we have the potential, we have capacity, and all together and driving companies such as, or leading companies such as Airbus need to be the driving force for Europe, because this is not the work of just one country. We need to work together with the universities, big and small companies and governments in Europe, really united to have this strategic position to have an important role in the world again. So Isabel, it's very interesting also talk about space and everything, but we'll talk about this another day. What do you think in Spain, this autonomy as regards innovation? Yeah, in Spain, of course. We've lost a lot of ground as a country and also as a continent. It is true that it is the time. The time has come because we have the funds and there's a stable determination. So we need to recover this ground we have lost. We don't need to go back, of course, but we have an opportunity to recover some ground. In talking about cybersecurity, either you're a wolf or a lamb, and that's true. But this is also a very fragmented market with a lot of smaller fragments or subsectors dominated by foreign companies. Even though at Indra we're leading European cyber defense, we're leading this consortium with Airbus and Leonardo, for example. There are areas where we have to concentrate and discriminate from others. Otherwise, we would be spreading our resources too thin, and also in the space industry. That's a different topic, of course, but there's a lot we can do to recover some ground in the space field, not only with the right policies we have now, but also with European programs that are being promoted, with the contributions from funds we have, which are unprecedented in Europe. And this sovereignty must be put into practice together in a consortium, because if we don't do it this way, the fragmentation is so big that we won't be able to recover our position never again. It's not only defense and security, but also in the industry. It is clear that Europe is looking to breaching the technology gap. And we need to do this together. In the past, it wasn't this way. We took a more local approach. Thank you very much to both of you. A big round of applause for them. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I am sorry you were the last. So we're going to be wrapping up with some thank yous. You can see this session in retina.com. Tomorrow we'll have a summary available online, and in the following days we will be writing some articles about this in El País. I would like to thank our sponsors, Airbus, Cepsa, and Indra, and Santander Bank, and also I would like to thank especially my colleagues of PRISA, Jaume Serra, the director of PRISA in Catalonia, and this is been possible because of him. Also the City Council and Jaume Colboni for their support. And as he said, we wish it's the first of many other occasions that we will be sharing with you together here in Barcelona, and we can go outside for a little cocktail in the room that's outside this auditorium, where you can enjoy fantastic views of Sagrada Familia and the sea. And just a little video to end this session.